Welcome everyone to the March Entuity Tech Talk. I'm John Diamond and I'm a product manager at Entuity. And also with me today is my colleague Larry Bailon, who is a system engineer, also at Entuity here in the US. We're going to be your hosts for the next 30, 40 or so minutes to talk about some exciting new developments. Tech Talks, as most of you know, are designed for our customers and technical members of our authorized partner community. These sessions are recorded and are available on demand from the Entuity YouTube Center. They're a good resource for learning more about the product or reviewing features you may be interested in implementing. Let's get started. Today, we're going to be using the recently completed Entuity 16.5 Patch 1 and highlighting its new enhancements. By the way, the patch will be available for you to download and use at the end of March, which, according to my calendar, is this Friday. Also, we'll be sending you written details of the new features in this patch, so you won't need to take too many notes as we go through on today's call. It's a full schedule, so let's get started. We've got a number of items to talk about because rather than just being bug fixes, this patch actually contains a whole raft of new functionality and enhancements. So that's what I'm going to focus on today, the new features and enhancements. And let's begin with a very important item, which is a brand new integration between BMC's TrueSight Operations Management Presentation Server and Entuity, which allows a whole suite of Entuity functionality to be embedded within the TrueSight Operations Management user interface. In a moment, Larry is going to take you through what this delivers and how to install and configure it. But the important thing to note is that although you can today and up till now take advantage of an incident forwarding integration, which allows for real-time notification in the TrueSight Operations Management environment of items that have been detected that are anomalous or worthy of note for operators within the TrueSight Operations Management environment to be aware of, and also then drill back down from those events within TrueSight back into Entuity. This new integration allows visibility and access and interaction with components that are being monitored within the network infrastructure by Entuity, but within the presentation server. So it keeps the workflow for those who are using that interface today totally within that interface, even though the network infrastructure components that are added are actually being provided by Entuity under the hood. As far as the users are concerned, it is all within the presentation server. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to Larry, who is going to take you through it. Larry.
Thank you, JD. Let me share out my screen here, and we'll go right to the presentation server. So what I'm sharing out right now is just a presentation server we have with the integration installed. I'll click here to bring up the different dashboards. You'll see there is a monitoring, configuration, and network dashboard and administration. The monitoring dashboard is the standard dashboard interface for the BMC TrueSight presentation server. You'll see here that there are applications, devices, events. The network dashboard is a brand new component developed by Entuity, and it's integrated into the Entuity server. If I click this, you'll see there are 3 different dashboards available, one that monitors services, one for devices, and one for top end. We'll come back to that in a minute. As everybody here who does have a BMC product knows, we have an existing integration where events received by Entuity can be displayed by TrueSight. That is right here under the standard dashboarding interface. If I click this, this will bring up all of the outstanding events. And this is an integrated dashboard. So it's basically taking events in from the entire infrastructure. I have a hyperlink here that I can select any event. It will give me the details on that event. If I select the Object tab here, with every event that we send, you're familiar with this, there's an object URI that allows you to cross-launch back into the native Entuity web UI. But I'm really excited about this. So I'm going to, without further ado, I'm going to bring up the services panel. So we have a couple of services that I've configured on the Entuity server. So the first time you bring up this dashboard interface, you actually have to log into the Entuity server with your credentials. But you'll see here I'm monitoring my internet routers and my internet links. These are both services that are being monitored by the Entuity server. Today the network is running great, so you'll see that both of these services are okay. If any of the services were in a state other than okay, and there are 4 states for the services, down, unknown, degraded, or okay, those would be indicated by the number of services in those states, and you can apply filters to these so that you can filter on specific states of these services. This is a hyperlink. This will hyperlink directly into Entuity, but it's not going to cross-launch Entuity. It's actually going to bring back the services page for this particular service. It gives me a list of the components. It gives me a list of the key metrics. And the reason that you're seeing no data in the 2 left-hand gauges is because I've chosen not to aggregate port-level data. I did that when I selected the service. All the devices and ports that are part of the service are shown here. And if I scroll down this page a little further, you'll see that there's a description of the service and how it is operating. All of these will drill down. So if I want to look at this particular router that's part of this service, I can simply click here, and it's going to bring up, which would be considered the Explorer tool in the interface, but it's bringing up this in the native TrueSight presentation server interface using the same look and feel of the other TrueSight dashboards. Again, if I want to drill down to any of these metrics, if I want to look at the chart of the CPU utilization, I don't have to go back into the Entuity server. I can directly launch from here. And if I scroll down, this is one of the other features of the software, or at least we'll be discovering later, but the policy maps for QoS are also displayed here. But I can drill down to any of these. I'll show those drill downs in a moment. The next dashboard that we have is the devices dashboard. If I click here, this is going to pull back all the devices I'm monitoring. Again, our network is running great today, so all 64 devices that I'm monitoring are in the state okay, meaning that they're all responding. This is a great dashboard. If you turn the polling off of any devices, that actually will set this flag off. If they're unknown, degraded, or down, they're also shown here. And again, there's a hyperlink for me to go and drill down and get additional information. I'm going to pick on this other router. Again, if I drill down, it's going to pull the information basically from the device summary page within Entuity. And then if I want to bring up the graph, it'll actually bring the chart into the TrueSight dashboard. I'll go back to the device. And again, there's also hyperlinks at the port level. So if I want to hyperlink into let's find a port that's, let's try this one here. So yes, we've got some information here. There's also a policy map, QoS policy map associated with this port. And again, I can drill down and bring up a chart directly within the TrueSight presentation server. And the last dashboard that we've developed for this is the top-end dashboard. So those of you familiar with the Entuity interface, the top-end dashboard consists of the top end, and it's all port level information. This dashboard for the TrueSight presentation server has actually been enhanced. So in addition to the standard port level metrics for faults, listeners, talkers, utilization, and discards, if I scroll down, we also have included device level metrics for CPU utilization, memory utilization, and response time. And again, the light blue indicates that we have drill downs directly in here. So if I want to go into this device and look at the memory utilization, it will bring me directly into that Explorer interface without actually having to open up and cross-launch into Entuity. If you do need to launch into our native interface, in the upper right corner of the web page, there's a hyperlink that says Open in Entuity. I can click that, and this will come back directly into the context of the device I was looking at. I'll come back to the TrueSight dashboard. So the other nice thing I like about this feature is how easy it is to implement. So from the perspective of Entuity, you need to upgrade to patch 1, and then we provide you with a zip file that's basically you add a component to TrueSight. So you do have to copy that zip file to the TrueSight server, and you have to run a single line command that adds the component to the TrueSight presentation server. To add this, you simply go to the Administration tab here, and you select Components. And you'll see that we've already got the Entuity server added. You can only add one server, and I'll just show you how easy it is to do that. All you do is select here, Add Component. You select the component type, and from the pull-down menu, it's Entuity Network Monitoring. You provide the host name or IP address of the Entuity server and the port number. And it's the web interface, so it's going to be either port 443 or port 80. It's literally that easy. Then you save this, and you're ready to go. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to JD, and he's going to explain some of the other features of the patch release.
Thank you very much, Larry. And Larry actually demonstrated a moment ago. There is some additional information relating to quality of service monitoring that is now front and center within the user interface, both within the presentation server interface and also the native Entuity web user interface. We have a capability within Entuity to discover and monitor Cisco quality of service configurations primarily on their routers or routers for those across the pond, and that allows you to understand and visualize the hierarchical configuration of the quality of service aspect of those devices, and automatically monitor and via threshold-based event generation produce warnings that are then forwarded through to TrueSight in real time of anomalies that may need further intervention. So all of that monitoring of the different queues, the policing capabilities, and the other aspects of the QoS configuration is available. Previously, it was available through the Advanced tab of the Explorer in the Entuity UI. It still is. However, we've also added extra visibility not only at the port level, because these are all port concepts. The QoS configuration applies to each port, but also at the device level. So if there is any QoS configuration on a device, it will be exposed at the device level. And Larry can take you through that in just a moment. We've done some other modifications to the user interface as it relates to the way that we monitor wireless controllers. We've got various different manufacturers' controller architectures supported within the product, And if you take the wireless controllers under management when you have the wireless module enabled, it will understand all of the configuration, not only the controller, but also of the wireless access points that are dynamically associated with each controller. So you'll see a whole list of access points for each controller, and as of patch 1 in 16.5, that user interface will also show you the state of each of those associations. So which ones of your access points are actually currently associated and which ones have recently become disassociated. Incidentally, on the wireless front, we've added support for the Cisco Meraki cloud-configured wireless architecture. That is a deviation from the more traditional style of controller architecture, where the controllers would be on the enterprise premises themselves. With Meraki, the controllers are actually cloud-hosted, and you subscribe to a controller service that then dynamically controls your access points. And we can support that in a very similar way to the way that we support the other controller architectures. We've also done some user interface enhancements to the way that virtual machines and virtual networking is monitored, specifically related to the way that we show the status of virtual machines on a hypervisor, to make it far more easily apparent which virtual machines are in which state. And with that, I'm going to once again hand over to Larry, who can show you everything that I've just been talking about.
Thank you, JD. I'll go out and share my my desktop again, and I'll select the Entuity interface, and we'll select a suitable router to show the new QoS enhancements. So this particular router does have QoS enabled, and if I scroll down, you'll see that the policy maps are shown right on the device level summary page. As JD explained before, we collect a lot of information, and we monitor a lot of different parameters for QoS-enabled devices. Previous to this patch, the information was there, and it was in the Advanced tab. So we made it a lot easier to get to it. If I select the this traffic hyperlink, this will give me some tabular information based on the QoS policy map and the type of traffic here. I'll pick the Facebook feed for the class of service, and this will drill down and provide me with information in a graphical format. So the pre-policy bit rate, the post-policy bit rate, utilization, and so forth, and then I can drill down here and actually bring up the charts. I'll go back, and if I select the class default, this will actually look at the entire class and give you information on the packet rate and the pre and post policy bit rates after the QoS parameters have been applied. And again, there's a drill down to the graphical information. I'll move on to the wireless controller enhancements. So I've got one wireless controller. It's an Aruba controller. On the summary page, you're all familiar with this if you're monitoring wireless controllers. But if I start scrolling down, you'll see that now we've added information about the wireless LAN SSIDs and also the access points. They're on the summary page. We also will update the status and indicate whether or not these access points are associated or disassociated with the controller. And then we also, this last column will give you a host count. And if you want, each one of these columns it can be sorted on. So if I wanted to sort from in descending order or ascending order for the number of hosts attached to that AP, I could. I'm going to go back to the name. So for the SSID, I'll hyperlink into this campus domain, and what this is going to do, it's going to aggregate information about the access points that are part of this SSID. So it gives me a graphical representation of all of the attached hosts that are part of this campus domain, how many access points are up over time, how many are down, and again, similar to before, we can drill down into this chart information and have a graphical output. I'll go back to the main device summary page, and we'll just pick an access point. Again, I can hyperlink here. It'll drill down and give me some information on the radios that are part of this access point, and then if I need additional information on either the A or the G service, I can simply drill down, and there'll be a set of graphs that indicate the operational status, hosts that are attached to this, any physical channel changes, transmit power, and then there's also detailed information on how the radio is performing as far as throughput and errors. And again, they're all zoomable, so if I wanted to look, for example, at the MAC error packets, I can do that. And then the last thing I'm going to cover very quickly is the enhancements that were made for monitoring VM platforms. So I do have a vCenter here. And in the summary page, you'll see there are a couple of hypervisors associated with this. So if I drill down to the hypervisor level, what we're providing now is the status of each of the VMs that are associated with this hypervisor. So I'm going to scroll down, and you'll see here that there are basically three different states that the VMs can be in. If I hover over this, the mouse over, green means it's powered on. This blue icon means that somebody's gone in there and suspended the VM, and then anything with a red X in it indicates that the VM is powered off. I can also drill down into the VM itself directly from this page to get additional information on that VM. How much host memory we're consuming, how much guest memory, and also CPU performance as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to JD, who will explain to us the last two features of the release.
Hey, thank you, Larry. Let's take a look at stream migration. This is a command line utility provided for the use of administrators, and it addresses the need on occasions to move the management responsibility for monitoring certain devices from one Entuity server to another. Let me give you a good example of where this might be needed. And that would be those who are taking advantage of the new overlapping IP address range support that was introduced at 16.5, particularly the managed service providers, the MSPs, who have responsibility for monitoring the networks of multiple customers, particularly the smaller customers, who would often have the same IP address ranges in use, such as the 10 dot range or the 192.168 range. Those IP address ranges are often reused, and the standard approach in the past to managing that is to allocate a separate server to each of these customers. It can be a virtual machine if you wish, and to then link those together into a consolidation server. At 16.5, we introduced this overlapping IP address support, which meant that you could, in fact, manage multiple of these networks, even though their IP address ranges overlapped, and they could be managed from a single server, so that you no longer have to deploy multiple servers just because of overlapping IP addresses. Now, for those MSPs that already have multiple servers deployed, and they want to take advantage of this capability to condense the footprint, the management footprint, down onto one or a few servers. They're going to want to move the responsibility for managing the devices on their customer networks from one server to another. Now, the way that would now be done is that you would take those devices under management on the new server on which they are to be managed. That will establish them, but it won't have any history going back earlier than the time at which the management was begun. The stream migration utility is used to export the history for all of the devices that you wish to export. You don't have to do all. It can be a subset on a given server. They're exported to a file. That file is copied over to the new server on which those devices are going to be managed, and that same utility is used to import that history data into the database on that server so that it then augments the history associated with those devices that are now under management on that server. So the long and the short of it is you can move devices from one server to another, take advantage of the overlapping IP address support, but even if you're not using the overlapping IP address support, there can be times when you want to move the responsibility for managing devices from one server to another. Even if all of your IP address ranges are completely unique, there can still be a need to do that. So it's more than just the MSPs that are going to be able to take advantage of this capability. And one of the items that I've got listed here, which I'd like to bring your attention to, is a new report. Its purpose is to allow you to take devices such as switches, but it will also handle routers, and to very succinctly and clearly catalog those interfaces or ports which are connected to other parts of the network infrastructure, so the infrastructural connections, including connections to wireless access points. So not only have you got switch to switch and switch to router connections, but you've also got switch to access point connections, and they would all be listed in such a report. Larry, do you want to just give us a shot at that particular report?
Sure. Hang on. Let me go back out and share out my screen here. And we'll go to the report repository. So it's part of the standard report repository, and it's in the category of connectivity and routing and infrastructure connectivity. And I'll quickly pick a device that is a switch that I can pick, and I'll run that. And let me just expand this a little bit so everybody can see. It basically is a tabular report that lists the local device, the local interface, the remote device, and the remote interface, and the remote hardware platform. So that this, again, from an infrastructure perspective, as JD said, when you've got infrastructure that involves both switches and wireless controllers, this report becomes very valuable for determining where those access points are connected within your infrastructure. And with that, I think we're going to open it up for questions.
Actually, before we take the first question, I just want to throw in one extra item which we didn't even get into the list of bullet points here, and that is that we've extended, once again, our RESTful API, this time adding a capability to extract not only object data, that's static data about devices, but also time series data. So you are now able, via the API, to export time series samples over any arbitrary time period that you specify. Now you specify which attributes from which components you want to export, and then that would be performed and an XML-based export via the API would be produced. And that is intended for integration into things like external dashboard systems and other systems that may want to analyze or consolidate that data elsewhere. Okay, do we have any questions, Pat?
We certainly do. The first one is, How are permissions to objects in the dashboards and TrueSight handled?
Okay, let me handle that one. One thing that Larry mentioned was that when you first open up the dashboards and the first time that you make access after bringing up your browser to any of the network facilities, that would be the services, devices, or the top-end reports within the presentation server, you will be prompted for your Entuity credentials. Once you've logged in, that's the last time you'll need to enter that within that browser session, unless you explicitly log out or you shut the browser down and start it up again. Those credentials define your scope of permission within the Entuity environment, which means you are only able to see what the administrators have permitted you to see, and that will be the limit of your access. So from a permissioning standpoint, it's not defined by the account by which you log into the presentation server with. It's defined by that first login, the first and only login to Entuity, which will be prompted for when you access network information.
Okay, thanks, JD. And then when you add an Entuity server via components in TrueSight, do you add each polling server, or can you add a consolidation server and inherit all the polling servers added to the consolidation server?
The good news is it's the latter. You don't have to add each and every one of your Entuity servers individually. All you do is add the consolidation server. It will only acknowledge and actually use the first of the Entuity servers that you add. The TrueSight components interface doesn't stop you adding multiple, but only the first one is actually used. And that would be your consolidation server, which means that it would front-end all of the access, and you would have access to everything that you're permitted access to within your entire Entuity environment.
Okay, thanks, JD. And then, is there a way to see computer MAC address connected to certain access points?
That, the best way to do that at the moment is via the interface on the switch to which that access point is actually attached. We will monitor and maintain knowledge of which unique MAC addresses are actually attached via that port. And so the access point acts pretty much like an old-fashioned shared media hub. And it will present those MAC addresses at that switch port. So rather than going through the UI to ask that question of the access point, you could obtain it from the port to which the access point is connected, and you simply need to locate that port via the IP address of the access point. We'll show you the IP address, and you can quickly search for the port to which that access point is connected.
Okay, thank you. And then relative to the new dashboard, what type of authentication is used? Do you need an Entuity account specifically?
The authentication of the user and coming in as far as the Entuity side of the house is concerned is via that first login that I mentioned. So it's not based upon the permissions associated with the account by which you log into the presentation server. It's based on when you make your first access to network information, you're going to be prompted for the Entuity login. If you've got your Entuity servers configured to authenticate via LDAP to an Active Directory external authentication server, that is how it will happen. If they're configured to authenticate locally within the Entuity servers, that's how the authentication will happen. But it's exactly the same as just accessing Entuity directly. All of your authentication is done in the same way.
And then can we see net flow results in the dashboard as well?
Yes, you can. In fact, that's a good point that we didn't get to. If you've got a device, a router, that is sending NetFlow or any flow records. They don't have to be NetFlow. We support IPFix, NetStream, JFlow, SFlow, a whole bunch of different flow protocols from different vendors. But if any of them are being handled by Entuity, and we've got the handling of that enabled for that particular device, then you will see at the device level overall device statistics about the flow rate coming in. That will be in the presentation server dashboard. There'll actually be a hyperlink there as well that will vector you out into the Entuity UI in the Flows tab of the Explorer, which means that the individual ports that are presenting flow information will be listed. Also, within the presentation server UI, within those dashboards, if you select a port on a device that has flow information, you will see the same style of top 5 histograms that are presented within the Entuity UI. So you'll have the top 5 conversations, top 5 applications, top 5 classes, etc. Listed. They're in the presentation server. If you click on one of them to drill down, you will be able to drill down, but it's going to take you out into the Entuity UI. So all it's going to do is just bring up another tab, and you're into the Entuity UI in the context of that particular type of flow information, and you'll be able to drill down further. But fundamentally, the information is visible at the device and port level within the presentation server.
Okay, and then another question has come in the route map. Does it integrate IP flow from Intuity to BMC?
I'm assuming here we're talking about the flow type reporting that I've just been mentioning, the NetFlow. That information is presented within the dashboard. The actual raw metrics are not transferred through to the TrueSight Operations Management System within this arrangement. They are retained within Entuity so that you can access it whenever you wish. But the presentation of it at the device and the port level is within the presentation server.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question is, what versions of the presentation server will the new integration run on?
Well, that's a good one. We forgot to mention it. Right. This is based on 10.5, which has just been superseded this week by BMC's 10.7 release of the presentation server. That is also supported. We have run compatibility tests and validated that we are compatible with both 10.5 and 10.7.
Okay, and then one last one. When will topology maps be made available in the TrueSight presentation server dashboard?
Right, now that is an interesting point. We don't yet have it in the roadmap, but it is on the cusp. What we are looking for at this point is for users of the presentation server and Entuity to work with us and let us know what makes sense for us to add in terms of extensions in the future. That's an obvious one that could well have value. We would want to explore the use cases and the workflow around how that would be used. But certainly that is of relevance, and I'm sure there are many other aspects that would benefit users of the TrueSight Operations Management environment to improve the efficiency of their overall workflows when bringing in this enormous range of network information that Entuity offers. So we would like to hear more. Do please reach out to us, and we would love to engage you in a conversation.
And that's it for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Pat. So it looks like that's it for the questions. However, do feel free to send us emails on tech.talks@entuity.com for any questions you have later on. or even to suggest future Tech Talk topics. We're very serious about that. We want to know what you want us to talk about. Now, for folks up in the New England area, we are going to be at the BMC Digital Day in Boston on May the 9th. Details can be obtained from Entuity.com. And while I'm mentioning that, anybody who hasn't looked at Entuity.com in the last week, you would benefit from doing so. We have completely upgraded our corporate website. Lots of good new information up there. The next Tech Talk is scheduled for Wednesday, May the 3rd, and the topic's going to be role-based access. Now, we were talking a few minutes ago about authenticating users. It's more than just authenticating them in, it's a matter of determining what permissions and access they have. There's a raft of facilities there. We're going to talk in detail about it on May the 3rd. To wrap up, we will send you a video link of today's presentation for your use, but also do please feel free to share it with your colleagues. If you have any questions about today's content or would like a personal demonstration from our sales engineers, be sure to contact one of those Entuity sales engineers. And for those of you who are BMC Entuity customers, we would really like to hear any and all comments on the new dashboard integration. Please send them to Pat's attention, and her email address is pat.o'hara, that's O-H-A-R-A, at Entuity.com. We're going to be sending you written summary on details of this new patch content, so that will be heading your way very shortly. And I'd just like to finish off by thanking you all for attending today. And we're looking forward to seeing you all back on May the 3rd. And once again, we're going to be looking at role-based access. Have a great rest of the week.